Hi, welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White. I'm the founder of the Bobby White Foundation, and as you can see, I'm kind of by myself, but my partner in crime is around here somewhere. There she is.
Hi, good morning. I'm your co-host, partner in crime, Bonnie Snyder. I'm a little remote today. Actually, no, I'm a lot remote today.
So, what is going on, girl? How did your surgery go?
Well, I mean, the surgery went good. So again, good morning, guys. I am remote but soldiering on. I had knee surgery on Tuesday, and it was like, "Oh, are you coming to the studio today, or are we filming today?" First of all, it's like, "Yeah, I think we can film today. Are you coming to the studio?" That was the question. Um, but no, I think, I mean, the surgery itself went really well. Um, from what I understand, just timelining a little bit. It was a very short surgery. I want to say maybe like 30 minutes. My surgeon was amazing. Dr. Jennifer Swearingen from Alexander Orthopedics, plug out for them. But what is it? Yesterday, Wednesday. I'm getting my days corrected. Wednesday, the day after surgery, it was like I, felt okay. She says you can walk on it afterwards. You should be able to put weight on it. I was like, okay, cool. But I know me. I like put weight on it. Probably means I'm going to go run marathons. And you know, so I, kind of walked around the house a little bit. I'm like, okay, this is not too bad. But now I'm in that process where the anesthesia is wearing off, the pain block that they had in the knee is wearing off. So it's like, yeah, not good. Um, a little nauseous. Yeah, not that I want to do TMI, but yeah, this is going to be the healing process is going to take longer than what I think what I anticipated. But I'm glad to be here. It's nice to know that we could do this remote.
Oh, yeah. Well, when we started doing this, I mean, I remember the first time we did it, and we did this like really super early on into starting our show. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it makes it really really good.
I remember. Yeah, it was like either like our third or fourth show in when I was in Texas.
Yeah.
Uh, we remoted in, and then we did a remote in from Kansas. And then here we are. Remoting in from we're in my living room today. So,
Well,
but
that's good. I'm glad that you're on the mend, and yeah, unfortunately, it always takes longer to heal than what we anticipate or would really like for it to be. But before we go any further, I really want to thank Area 52
Rob,
Media Group and Rob and John, especially Rob, because he's the one who makes these like remote things work, and so that we can do this, even though one of us is part way out of commission, but we can still get together and do our show and talk and bring information to you guys, and we greatly appreciate that. Right?
yeah, no, we could not pull this off without Area 52 and Rob and John, and John with his support, of the show and giving us, the platform, and then Rob putting up with us every week in the studio and cutting up and the antics that go on before the antics that go on before we go live.
And it was
Uh,
still happening here, even though you weren't here. So I'll tell
I
you
can
later.
imagine. Yeah, I can hear the boss in the background. But yeah, no. To that point, I mean, we are blessed to have an amazing team behind us, helping us, allowing us to bring this to you.
That is for sure, for sure. You know, when I messaged you earlier, I don't know if you saw this or not. but last Sunday on CBS's Sunday morning, which I watch regularly every Sunday morning with my coffee, there was this young gal on there, and I hadn't heard of this before, but I thought it was very interesting. It was about a law that's being introduced, and I think a couple of states have already adopted it. It's called Donna's Law, and it is a tool for suicide prevention. Basically, how it started out, and it kind of falls into our theme with our book that we're doing right now is finding meaning. And how this came about was Katrina, what's her name? Katrina Brees. She's the daughter. Her mom, Donna, took her life on June 26th in 2018. And if you go to, I'm sure you can bring it up on demand, CBS Sunday morning to see the clip or that takes of what they spoke about. But anyways, her mom was a really real happy kind of jovial person, just like we all say, with our loved ones who have taken their lives. It's just you just kind of don't expect it. And she was a woman who did not like guns. She never owned a gun. She didn't like having guns around, but she had some mental health issues, and one day she decided to Google where she could find a gun, and she was able to go purchase it, and she took it and took her life. Under a tree, they call it in this area. I think it's in. I'm not sure. I think it's in New Orleans.
It is in New Orleans.
New Orleans, yeah. And so she bought the gun, box of bullets, and drove to this park. It's called Audubon Park, and there's this tree that a lot of people go to, and it makes it's a place that her and her daughter would go to also. And she took her life. She shot herself. So Katrina has been fighting for this law, Donna's Law, and it's very unique. It's a voluntary self-registry for people. So you voluntary self-register so that you are prohibited from purchasing a gun. For those, it's a tool to create kind of a self-defense for somebody who may be suicidal. It's something that can be reversed. It's not something that has to, if you do this, then this is you forever. But it's a really unique law that is being, introduced. And she says, it's not going to prevent every suicide by gun or every suicide, but it's just another tool in our arsenal to help protect those.
And I think it's important that, as we talk about the law, and how it came about, and this tragedy, that we talk about the chain of events. And so as I was reading the story about this particular incident, it said the mom suffered from bipolar disorder. And as I'm reading this, I'm always struck by and I mean, not surprisingly struck, let's just put it that way. And I say that, being in the field, that I sometimes wonder that people don't always make the connection between mental health and a suicide, or you have to be totally depressed. You have to be this, and I'm not going to say that that's not an aspect of it. But as I was doing some research on this particular law, it says, in 2018, she wrote a letter to her psychiatrist that said, "Dear doctor, it's been 9 months since this episode began. I'm not doing well. How long must I endure this?" And then it was just a few days later, Tammy, to your point, on June 26, 2018, she bought a gun, fatally shot herself. And her daughter, this Tree of Life in New Orleans, it's a treasured landmark. And she said her mom, or the daughter, said, the space is sacred. It felt to her like she laid herself in the cathedral of our community and died there. And that's a quote from the daughter. But what I find with with this story, it is a stark illustration of the mental health issue that we have here, in our country, and the fact that it can be devastating for some people to struggle to go through, as you're dealing with mental health illnesses, and whether it's therapy or medication, or a combo of the two, to deal with the demons that you're dealing with. Unfortunately, not everybody's able to overcome them, and it results in someone taking their life. Whether and it's not just when we're dealing with what am I trying to say? Mental health disorders, and suicide. It's everything that follows mental health. It is the substance use disorders. It is the acting out. It is the isolation. It is all of those things. And I tend to put suicide at the very, very top. Like, of course, that's like the final straw. And unfortunately, some people feel this is. I can't take it anymore. I can't deal with it anymore. Therapy's not working. Medication is not working. It makes me think of one of the things that Patrick said to me before he left. "I'm tired of feeling like I feel." And when I listened to the story, those words resonated with me. "I'm tired of feeling like I feel." And, you know, we all have gone through periods of time where, we've been down, we've been depressed, we've struggled with something, we've dealt with breakups or loss of a job, or you can think of a myriad of things that, setbacks that we go through. When I think of, some of the, children that I work with, teenagers that I work with, failing a test, not getting a part in a play, not getting picked for the football team, your best friend not wanting to, hang out with you anymore. All of these things that, some of us, it's like, it's just life. It's okay. It's okay. It's not just life to some people. And, as I was looking at this law, and I think it's important that we point out that um, this law is named, there's another Donna's Law here in Florida
Yeah, I was going to bring
that,
that up.
that
I was going to bring that up because I'm curious as to how this would work here in Florida because of this other Donna's Law that went into effect July 1st. And this is in Florida, and it is a law to make it easier to prosecute sexual abusers of children long after the crime has occurred. And basically, it is taking that the time frame out. There's no time limit, So I was going to bring that up too. It's curious how it may have to be reworded or something done if this this tool for suicide is brought into Florida.
Well, and going back to the article, and I think I would say why this law is so important is when you think about the ways that people choose to die by suicide, the gun is the best tool for the job.
It's the most efficient.
It's the most efficient, and where they if you look at statistics, and this is statistics from, I want to say, like 2020, that says 2 to 3% of people who attempt suicide by overdose die, but 95% of the people who use a firearm dies. So when you look at the fatality between an overdose and and a firearm, oftentimes, or say 95% of the time, individuals who choose to use a firearm don't get a second chance.
No.
Um, and I remember, when I was going through my schooling, how they were talking about suicide and, suicidal methods. And, you know, some time ago, it was more prevalent for a man to use a firearm than a woman.
Well, I think the statistics hasn't really changed all that much, but it is that more men will use a firearm. More females tend to go the drug overdose route, but those means are closing. The gap is beginning to close a little bit. In the program on CBS, they said that 3 out of 5 suicides are by firearms.
Right. And the statistics also point out that here in the United States, there is roughly 25,000 suicide deaths by firearm each year. Now let's think about that: 25,000 firearm suicide deaths.
I think I saw something just recently that we have actually, and it's not to negate this other, because the other is horrific, that there are actually more deaths by suicide by firearm than there are shootings.
Yeah, it's like I said, as I was looking at, our line of work is all about statistics and numbers, and sometimes I find when I'm looking at stats and I see a particular number, it makes sense to me. It's like, wow, that's high, or I expected to see something like that. There are other times where the expectation is there, but you still have that moment of, holy cow.
Right.
That is like, you expected it to be high, but did I expect it to be that high?
Exactly. I had a gal contact me from, remember the night that, when we gave that presentation at the Catholic Church, a gal contacted me a few weeks ago and wanted a copy of the statistics of the graph that I showed her on how, where in Florida, we're above the national average in suicide deaths. And it just, that was almost the one thing that just really stuck in her mind and just kind of blew her mind. Just like, I just can't believe that it's that high, that it's that bad. And
well, I think the other thing too, for me, what I found like striking, telling, the word I want to use. We hear so much about the debate over gun legislation and regulating guns and all this other stuff. And I think for me, there are times where I'm like, guys, get over yourself. Just like I get, I don't know if the word is I want to use, annoyed but I do like the eye roll when, we start talking about gun legislation and the first words out of, some of my friends' mouths is, oh, they're trying to take our guns away.
Right,
It's,
right,
Second Amendment rights.
right,
And, for me, I say, well, first of all, I'm not trying to make this political. I look at myself, first of all, you don't have the first darn clue of your Second Amendment rights. That's just a talking point that people are using because it sounds good, you know. But let's dig down in the weeds and look at why legislation is needed, and why we need to have a robust, um, unglossed conversation, regarding, guns and gun violence. It's like, um, typically what happens is you'll hear the arguments about, crime rates in, Detroit and in Philadelphia and, in the inner cities, and, who's shooting who and whatnot. And I think if we sit back and we look at, from a statistical standpoint, if you look at um, deaths by guns, or firearm deaths, anywhere from 60, and this is, statistics says 60 to 65% of all gun deaths in the United States is suicide. So if you think about this
right.
for a moment, while people are running around, hopping up and down about, and not that I'm saying that, gun violence needs to be minimized. Not saying that by any stretch
Right,
of the
right,
imagination. At the same time, um, do you consider the fact that where this gun violence is taking place, again, the repeat, 60 to 65%
right.
of gun deaths are suicide. It's not somebody shooting somebody else, it is somebody choosing to end their life.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, like you said, I mean, it's not to minimize, especially, our mass shootings and, I mean, even down here in Tampa Bay, I mean, sometimes it just is like, come on. But I don't, I don't know. This, I like the way that they're trying to initiate this law, because their emphasis is on, and that one, they interviewed one gal, and um, she she made a lot of sense. It's like when a person is in, you know, in the midst of the chaos, they're not going to register themselves. But when they're thinking clearly and they know that they have this issue, this possibility, that this is a way for them to help protect themselves. And some people do it and some people won't. But, like I said too, she said here, while it won't prevent every suicide, it could hopefully will prevent others. And it's a way to empower those who have this issue, who I mean, it's a worry, but it's a way to help keep them safe when they're in the midst of the turmoil. And
Right.
it's
As I
not
was reading,
something that has to be permanent either.
right. Well, as I was reading, the one of the articles that I was reading on this law, where it says an individual would have the opportunity to suspend, and I know I'm repeating, what you said earlier,
Okay.
Tammy.
That's okay.
An individual would have the opportunity to suspend their ability to buy a gun voluntarily, um, confidentially, putting their name into an already existing background check system. And if they attempted to buy a gun, that transaction would be denied. But then the question was asked, do we have the confidence that people who are suicidal would voluntarily request not to be sold a gun? And the reply was, and I agree with this, of course I agree with it. Yeah, duh. Um, but it does. During a suicidal crisis or depressive episode, I think it is unlikely that anybody would sign up. But there's a lot of people who've been in the dark place who come out on the other side and know that they're a danger to themselves. It's more of an advanced directive. Here, while I'm feeling better, let me prepare myself for that and just get the gun out of the equation. And, it says that, when you look at um, the people who, like, Katrina's mom, who had bipolar disorder, about 15% died by suicide. And, it's like anybody for any reason could put their name on this list. I think the question becomes, or the challenge to the law, or, it's not so much challenge to the law, let me rephrase that. The challenge becomes, would people be willing to put themselves on such a list? I use myself for an example. I'm not a gun owner. Okay, don't have guns in my house. I'm not opposed to guns. I think we've shared enough times. I'm retired military. Retired military police used to go to the range every single week and look forward to going to the range. So I have a like for guns per se. I just choose not to be a gun owner, if that makes sense. Some people like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I mean,
Right, and I hear a lot of people, when I was, as a matter of fact, I was in a conversation with someone here, within the last couple of days, and we were talking about guns, and I was like, I don't own a gun, and they looked at me. I know what it was. It was somebody. I was somebody visiting, and I have one of the gun locks, the that you can lock lock the
yeah, the
trigger with.
safety thing. Yeah.
No, it's like a padlock
Mm.
with the try to describe it. Anyway, it's a padlock kind of thing, and but it's used, to lock, to secure a gun. We get them at the VA a lot, and so somebody looked at this and they were like, "Oh, it was one of the kids, one of my grandson's friends who, they call me Nana. Nana, um, is this for your gun?" And I looked at, this kid, kid, I don't own a gun. And they were like, "What?" And I was like, "No, I don't own a gun." And they thought, and the response was, "I would have thought with you being in the military that you would own a gun." I was like, "No." And, I explained to them, I'm not anti-gun. I have friends who own weapons. Um, I have family members that own weapons. Again, it's just a personal choice.
Right.
But anyway, would I um, would I be prone to voluntarily put myself on a list that says, "Hey, I have this particular, diagnosis." Okay, and I have a couple of diagnoses. I'm comfortable sharing that. Would I think to put myself on the list? Would I want to put myself on a list? And I think for some of us, it becomes one of, I have enough strategies, coping skills that I could talk myself out of, or I could prevent myself from taking my own life. I know how to pick up a phone call and call the VA crisis line. I have friends, if I'm thinking of myself, I know that there are friends that I could have on speed dial. I have talked in my own head, well, if I did this, then I would do this. If I did this, then I would do this. If it were this, and my thing was, well, I can't shoot myself. I don't own a gun. Um, I can't swallow my medicine cabinet, because I would be one of those ones who, if I swallowed my medicine cabinet, I'd be on the phone to 911, hurry up and come and get me. And, I am a neat freak. So, slashing my wrist would be like, like, I can't leave a mess like that. That would be like just sacrilege. Um, but, again, I'm not opposed to the idea of the law. I would definitely be one, let me rephrase that. I am definitely one that stands behind the need for something like this. I just, you know, I'm just kind of stuck on how individuals would would put themselves on this list. Especially, and I think I would say one of the biggest barriers or challenges is the stigma that surrounds mental health. For me to say I have a diagnosis, it's like, well, wait a minute now. You're a mental health professional. You're not supposed to have a diagnosis. You're supposed to help us with our diagnosis. Or, like, well, how could you be in the mental health field and have a diagnosis? Well, very easy. Um, you know, um, if I think back, years gone by, for people to acknowledge that they were seeing a therapist was taboo. But then it became an issue where it was fashionable, to say,
Well, that's
I'm
what they're
going,
kind of saying
yeah,
now, yeah. But well, and I think that with something like this, it just kind of falls along into to line with all the other um, stigmas relating to suicide. The more that it's talked about, the more that people know about it, the more that you know it's something that's available. It can be, like you said, with the what your plan is if something happens. It could just be added to someone's safety plan. That is really now really starting to be implemented with people, with help from their therapists or whoever. They have a safety plan. They have, or a plan. If this happens, this is what I can do, and this is what I can do. And as you go down the line, it's another tool. And granted, it's one that it falls upon the person themselves, and that's where and the one gal that was interviewed, she said, if I'm in the middle of crisis, she said, no, I'm not going to think about doing that, but I've come out more than one time and come out on the other side, and yes, I know that this is a possibility. I'm going to put myself on there. Maybe down the road, several years, or whatever, no timeline, I decide that, hey, maybe I don't need this anymore, and you can take your name off. But I think it's a good tool. We need the tools for people, because not one thing is going to fit everybody. You need an arsenal. You need that toolbox, no matter how big it is.
I like the idea. Excuse me. I like the idea of adding it to the safety plan. Because when I think of, we, in our again, in our field, we have someone who, has struggled with this, suicidal ideation, and we've talked to them. They're coming off of that. If it's let's say if it was a Baker Act. We talk about, all right, are you safe? Let's develop, I like to call them a contract. Let's develop a contract safety plan, however you want to word it. Yes, but, it's more of a safety plan. And I think adding that piece to it, do you have firearms in the house? Because let's think about it. When someone comes and expresses, or when someone expresses suicidal ideation, one of the first questions we ask them, do you have a plan?
Right.
And, so when we're talking about, well, what is this plan? All right. So what is the mechanism that you plan to utilize, to end your life? And if it is, well, hey, I have a gun in the house. Let me, that's what I'm going to use. All right. So, well, first off, let's get the gun out of the house. Is there somebody you can give the gun to? Um, you know, yeah, I think there's a, how do you bridge that? I don't own a gun, because this particular law is designed to prevent people from going and purchasing a gun
Right.
to use later on in a suicide versus somebody that already has a gun in the house. Because the other thing is, what if I'm not, in a suicidal crisis, when I purchase the gun, then what? So I like, yeah, again, I see this as a very nice, robust first step. I feel that, there's, you know, some other pieces, that it either needs to, be added to it, or it needs to complement some already existing mechanisms that we have in place. I equally found it, a shame that this particular law is getting, and I mean, not surprising, that it's not getting a lot of traction in Congress.
Right.
And there are, a few states that have adopted, the particular law. Again, I think
Yeah, it's only like 3 or 4.
it was 3 or 4. If I can find
Yeah, it was yeah, not many at all that I recall when watching the program. And of course, Florida is not one, but then that's the issue too. Because when I first Googled that and it came up Florida, Donna's Law, which is different, which is a very important law. And the woman who introduced that to as the president and CEO of the Pace Center for Girls, which we have one here in Pasco. And this Donna's Law in Florida is extremely important also. And, it's something that should be throughout the United States.
So here it is. It's the 3 states that have passed Donna's Law is Washington, Utah, and Virginia.
Yeah, okay. Washington was one of them, yeah.
Yeah, it says Maryland has recently held hearings. And it says, the bill would give people prone to suicidality the agency to make decisions about their own access to guns when they are not actually suicidal. So, yeah,
So there is a website. Rob put it up a little bit ago, and you can see some links to some other things that have been happening with Donna's Law. Can you scroll down on that, Rob, or is it just the image of that? A little bit further. Yeah. Yeah, so you can click on any of those links. There's one where she was talking to a woman in Congress who I cannot pronounce her name, and I'm not going to try because I know I'll mess it all up. But there's a lot more information there on that website that you can go to, and I'm going to definitely be following this a little bit closer, especially here for Florida and everywhere, but. This is, I was, Sunday morning when I was having my coffee and this came up, it was just like, I was glad that they covered this, and it, bringing, more light to the situation and how, vast, the issue of suicide is in our country, and it's not just here, but this is where we are.
It comes down to when we're looking at any legislation, any legislation that has to do with mental health, suicide, regardless of where it comes from. It's like how many more people have to be affected?
Exactly.
In the case of suicide, how many more citizens have to die before, um, we stop the, what I call sometimes the partisan BS, and the, uh, is it I hate politics. I am not a fan of politics, never have been.
Me either.
You
Well, it's
know,
like, it's the same argument, even though, people don't understand that this is even much worse numbers wise than our school shootings, our mass shootings. Suicides in our country way surpass those numbers.
well, and it says here, again, going back to the article where it was like a day, 66 people die um, from a gun related suicide. And if you look at that, that is more people than any mass shooting that we've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's the same as.
And we've had more mass shootings than we've had days in the year.
Well, I mean, yes, there is that. I mean, when I look at um, what is the barrier or challenge to addressing, the mental health status, here in the country, whether it is um, mental health and our veterans, again, I'm very passionate about that. I'm a vet. Whether it is, suicide, whether it is, our children who are, affected. I listen to, um, and I'm listening to some of the, children that I speak to on a weekly basis, what they're going through, and hearing, some of them say, sometimes I wish, sometimes I think I'm better off not being here, and it's like, all right, guys, what is it going to take for you guys to open your eyes and recognize that, we have people in our community that are suffering. We have people in our community that are struggling. And, um, we're worried about, oh, so and so is not doing their job, or, so and so. And, the way I look at it in terms of politics, I don't think either side is really doing their doggone job. It's like, let's stop with the finger pointing and get down to doing, the work that needs to be done, to save people's lives. I did not mean to get on a soapbox, but I did. Just for a second.
But it's true, quit arguing about it and do something, just do something. You can't just sit back and say, oh, well, this is an issue, and, well, we can't do it this way because can't do something. It's better than nothing. We're out here, beating our heads against the walls, trying to do it our way, because they're not, or they can't, or they won't, and it doesn't make it makes what we're doing even harder, but it makes what we're doing all that more important also.
Well, to me, I find it, um, I use the word laughable to an extent, that I sit back and I'm laughing, and it's one of those, um, this makes no doggone sense to me kind of laugh. However, I sit back and it's like, well, we're more worried about a laptop and whether or not, and the results of an election than we are over, mental health, well-being, and, protecting citizens and putting mechanisms in place that, is going to benefit people's mental health, well-being, and save people's lives. I'm sorry, Houston, we got a problem here.
Well, I saw something on the news last night that here in Florida, we're more worried about children being exposed to transgender and what is it? The guys that dress up as girls. I know that.
Are you talking transgender stuff?
It's not the transgender, but they're putting that into it. But we're more worried about that than we are in protecting our own children from gun violence. And it's just
we're more concerned about somebody's choice of how they want to identify, or we're battling an issue over pronouns.
right.
I mean, I look at it like this, okay? I mean, oh, here we go, but back on the soapbox. I have no problem acknowledging I identify as a she. I'm a female, okay? I identify as a female. I'm, a heterosexual female. I'll throw that out there. If I decide one day that I want you to call me he, that I want you to call me Mr. Bonni instead of Ms. Bonni, you know what? How is that hurting you? How seriously, how's that hurting you? But if I'm somebody who, and I'm going to use my veteran status, but I'm somebody as a veteran who is suffering from, some of the stuff, some of the things that I had to deal with when I was in the military, and let's just say I'm a combat veteran, okay, and I'm coming home and I'm dealing with processing the horrors of war. And I'm struggling, with whether it's depression, whether it's PTSD, whether it is, a whole host of things. And in the back of my mind is that thought of, much like Katrina's mom, when does this stop? When does the torment stop? When does when do I get past this struggle that I'm dealing with? Again, my darling Patrick, when do I get to a point to where I'm no longer tired of feeling like I feel? It's coin the phrase maddening that, there are issues that it's like, what is the big deal? That we're beating our drum, beating the drum about, but we're not focused on this is something, this is what you really need to be focused on, or this is a higher priority than that.
Right. Saving people's lives, saving people's humanity. I mean, it's I didn't find out until after Bobby had passed away a couple of weeks prior to. He had made the comment to his sisters that, I don't feel good. Maybe everybody just be better off without me. I didn't know this until afterwards, but and he had multiple sclerosis for 25 years, which is can be a debilitating autoimmune disease that you don't recover from. It just continues to get worse. But and it's just another one of those things that how much longer do I have to do this? Is it going to get better? Well, with that, it's not going to get better. But maybe there's ways to make coping with it a little bit better. I don't know. And like with MS, people's mental health and suicide ideology, it affects everybody differently. There's no, you can't put everybody or anybody into one little, or giant, actually should be giant mold that, hey, this is going to be what we got to do and what we can do to stop it. It's not going to work that way.
It's not a one size fits all.
No.
There is no, in this, there is not a one size fits all. It doesn't, and I think, when I look at people who are, dealing with, those, diseases such as, MS, dementia, and whatnot, where, there's no cure. We know what the end result is going to be, although we may not have a absolute timeline of, progression and whatnot.
Right.
Putting things in place to, improve quality of life, so that, individuals aren't so burdened by the devastation of, I have to fight this disease. I have to fight, and again, when I say fight this disease, I'm all inclusive, whether it is the disease of a actual disease, I shouldn't say, well, let me take that back. I shouldn't say actual disease, whether it is the disease of multiple sclerosis, dementia, or anything like that,
Right.
whether it is the disease of, substance misuse, whether it is a mental health disorder that is, beyond someone's, control, or the result of, life happening. Um, I think it's time that, as a society, we really, really, really begin focusing on, I think things that are more relevant and important than, some of the silly, idiotic things that we argue and debate about.
Well, exactly. There's a lot of hot air out there.
Just leave it at that.
Just kind of saying. Oh man. Well, it does make me. I mean, it's kind of like a weird way to say it. It makes me happy to see more people beginning to talk about it, more things, beginning to be done. We've got a long, long, long way to go, but if people like Katrina, and I'm glad that CBS and Sunday Morning put this show on. They just keep doing it. Keep doing it like we keep doing it. This is our 95th episode. 95 times we've come on here to talk about suicide and grief, and we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop. So, anyways, so we, of course, didn't get to our book, but you didn't have yours handy anyways, did you?
What?
You didn't have your book handy anyways, did you?
Well, here's the thing with my book, and this, first of all, out of fairness, we weren't sure if we were going to tape
we
today.
didn't know until last night.
It's like, are we taping today? And my book is actually out in my car, and as I am hobbling around my house, I sat down. I'm sitting on my couch, and I'm like, okay, let me plug up the laptop so I could be ready, to tape. And, texting, with, John and Rob this morning, what time are we taping? Here, send the link to this email, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, credola, my book is in the car. And not having someone that I can say, hey, can you take my keys and go get the book out of the car? Was kind of like, that's not happening.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. We always end up with enough to talk about. We end up running out of time. One thing I want to do before we get to our ending stuff, which we'll bring it up more because it's going to happen in April in Pinellas County. It's a Growing Hope Town Hall for preventing suicide in young athletes. There's a QR code there that you can register. It's at St. Petersburg College, the Seminole campus. I've been there several times for American Foundation for Suicide Prevention events. So that's going to be coming up, and we'll keep showing this, and we'll have it on our Facebook page and website up until the event.
Tammy, what about our boat, the boat trip?
The boat thing is going to be tentatively April 6th. We may have to push that out a few more weeks. I'm really not sure yet because it's coming up like so fast. Freedom Boat Club of Tampa Bay is gracious enough to offer our lost survivors an awesome boat trip. And two, we're in the middle of spring break here too, and I think that's the last week of spring break. So I'm not really totally for sure with that yet.
Okay. All right.
So
our suicide numbers, we're winding it down
we have
here.
our hotline numbers. Be sure that you have these in your phone. The new 988 number is a call and text phone number.
And our quote.
You don't know which one I picked, did you?
Never stop believing in hope because miracles happen every day. We think about, what we're doing here. Not only Tammy and I, and the show, but everybody, a lot of people across the country that, are focused on, suicide prevention and making things better for society, building people up. Miracles do happen every single day, and sometimes when you least expect it. And as Tammy and I ride the show out every week,
there's always hope.
hope.
Thank you.